All right. So now I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Dave Kemp. Dave has been a member of the Jaffrey Fire Department and has taken over leadership in the care and upkeep of the Society's historic firefighting equipment and the Monadnock No. 4 firehouse. The challenge he faces tonight is keeping his presentation to 30 minutes because his knowledge is so vast and extensive, he could probably speak for 30 minutes on just the Seagraves fire engine left blinker. And if you give him a chance, he will. I know we're all in for a real treat tonight, so ladies and gentlemen, Dave Kemp.
Good evening. JHS, welcome to JFD. Please take note, we left the screen up on purpose. A little bit later on we're going to talk about these brass letters that still adorn the station here and the plaque, the Drostis P. Emery Memorial Station. They'll play into things a little later on. You notice we call this a historical glimpse in order so that we have time to talk about directional signals. Blinkers. My friends and mentors, Bill Driscoll served as a fireman in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, and was a part owner of a 1926 American LaFrance fire truck that was purchased and used to give local kids a ride on a real fire truck after Hastings Department refused to allow it. The truck is now part of the Boston Sparks Fire Museum collection in downtown Boston. Joe Manning grew up in Boston with a dad who was a firefighter for the city. Joe himself served on the Jaffrey Fire Department from 1956 to 1973. Without the support and assistance of these two gentlemen, the information uncovered and presented here tonight would have probably been lost to history. Tonight's program is presented in as much as possible in a chronological order and with great thanks to these two men. In 1991, I started work for Jaffrey DPW. I've been interested in the old fire station in Jaffrey Center for many years and wondered just what the heck was in it. Peachy Chalk got me the key to the building from Mary Payson, and inside I found a treasure trove of fire history and two hearses. A few weeks later, after my visit, I received a phone call from Eleanor Moore asking if I would be interested in becoming a Jaffrey Historical Society director. So started my association with JHS. I was able to team up with fellow JHS directors Bill and Joe, who shared my interest in the fire department history, and ultimately the decision was made to turn Monadnock No. 4 into a museum to display Jaffrey's fire relics. The building was so full one couldn't walk in but had to climb over the contents to get inside. The building was cleaned and arrangements made for the Canoia family to store the Society's two hearses. The town's first piece of firefighting equipment, the Firefly, is an 1827 Cooper, Phelps and Campbell. So it was the first to receive preservation and a new set of cranks so that the old tub could once again, in so grand an opening for the fire station, wet down was held July 25th, 1999 to dedicate the new endeavor. So there's the Firefly with Mr. Driscoll explaining what's going on and the new hand cranks, and the old girl pumped again and actually pumped a stream of water up over the roof of the building for its wet down. Here the Firefly appears in the 1923 Sesquicentennial Parade. The only person I'm able to identify in this photo is standing on the back of the pumper. That's a future Jaffrey selectman, by the way. Anybody remember Pee Wee Christian? That's Pee Wee standing up on the back of the Firefly on the very tail end of the parade there. Please note that the original hand cranks are evident in this photo. By 1932, at the dedication of the new Emery Fire Station, those important hand cranks were nowhere to be found, and hand cranks from Troy's Hubbard pumper were borrowed and found that they would fit into the Firefly and hastily borrowed for the occasion. Contoocook number 1, as it appeared this year at the fireman's muster at the Cester Centennial. The hand pump became more than just a parade piece and became part of the competition. Contoocook number 1 competed in its first ever muster and proudly finished in the money. When we started our research, this hand engine carried signage that incorrectly identified it as Contoocook number 2, 1848. Definitive records identified it, Contoocook number 2, as a button hand tub. This is like confusing a Ford with a Chevrolet to a car enthusiast. The Button hand engine was made in 1856 by Lysander Button of Waterford, New York, and the town did in fact own one. While this piece of equipment was built by Ephraim Thayer of Boston, Massachusetts, and probably before 1820. It has definitely been in Jaffrey since 1848, and probably a few years before that. It's been one of the stickling points for many years. There aren't a lot of records left around from 1848. It's my belief that Alonzo Bascom, who is the man that built the brick mill uptown, purchased the engine secondhand for protection for his mill. It probably served first in the town around Boston, traded in on a newer, more efficient engine, and there many changes in the pumps were done at the point it was traded in, make us to believe that the Hunneman Company of Boston made the upgraded improvements. And these old hand engines were identified by the maker and the size of their pistons and by the name that they carried. Many were also renamed during their lifetime, and it makes it rather difficult to keep track of them sometimes. When the East Jaffrey Suction Engine Company was formed, Bascom gladly turned over the engine and the job of fire protection to the fire company. This is some of the insides. This is a hand-hammered dome of the inside of the Contoocook. This was one of the photos we took during the restoration and preservation. If you look on the very top of it, it almost looks like a gear. That's all hand-hammered brass, and it's actually silver soldered together. The pressure dome helps even out the strokes. These were all pumped by hand and very slow, and the pressure dome helped give us smoother supply of water. This, in fact, is Contoocook number 2, quite a bit different. This is the only known photograph to exist. This engine was purchased by the town in 1856, and the town once again tapped Alonzo Bascom, sent him to Waterford, New York, and he purchased the engine and had it shipped back to Jaffrey. The town would sell this engine off in 1916 for a sum of $500. What you're looking at here is the Welcome Home Parade after World War I. The purpose is actually in the center. You see a striped, looks like a chimney. That is actually the tower of the fire station. Just because I know the pointer's not going to work. The other thing in this photograph that's really interesting, right there, this is River Street. That's a tank. In the Welcome Home Parade coming down River Street. A little stronger. That one's a little better. Contoocook Hall served as Jaffrey's fire station from 1855 till 1932, when it was torn down and replaced by the Emery Station on the same location. I have not been able to locate any photographs specifically of the fire station, but we do see it in the background in some of these other views. Here's one. It's taken the same day. The car parked in the big A-frame building now is a vacant lot. At that time, it was a blacksmith shop, and if you look, the car in front of that blacksmith shop is the same car parked in the same place.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a picture taken the same day.
Yeah.
probably just a little later in the day. And here's one taken from the other direction. And if the paper doesn't stick together. And this is Jaffrey's first ladder truck. Posed in front of the fire station, again on River Street, obviously looking towards the mill. Slow camera shutter speeds of that era would have made this a time-consuming project to photograph this thing. But it doesn't appear that traffic obstruction posed any problem. Slightly different view of the ladder truck. This was procured during Charles Rich's tenure as assistant fire chief. Anyone here ever heard of Charles Rich before? Anybody ever know he was on the fire department?
No.
A little bit more of Mr. Rich that we never knew about. Jaffrey also had 2 chemical engines. We don't have any photographs of them. I have some very poor photographs of pieces before they went to the fiery furnace in a scrap heap. But this is what they would have looked like. The first one was bought in 1900. It was purchased for a sum of $900. The residents were so pleased with the engine, the second one was purchased for Jaffrey Center for the sum of $850. In 1902, the town voted to pay the men of Monadnock No. 4, the Jaffrey Center Company, for their first 3 months from April 1 to July 1 of 1901. So this is the first we see of Jaffrey's 2 fire companies. For many years there were 2 companies in town. There was the Center Company, or Monadnock No. 4, or the Kentucky or the East Jaffrey Company here in downtown. This 2-company system would last until 1954 when gravity finally had its way and the 2 companies would join and come downtown. Incidentally, Don Sawtell of Jaffrey Center, former chief here, was the last man to join the Monadnock No. 4 company before its incorporation. Yes, Bob?
What is a chemical engine?
It is basically a big soda acid fire extinguisher on wheels. It's bicarbonate of soda in a tank, and you dump acid into it, and the carbon dioxide actually pressurizes the tank and forces the water out. So you're limited to what you have in that tank to put the fire out. And they were all hauled by men and ropes to get into the fire. Very primitive, but they were considered time faster, better, and easier than a hand-pumped fire engine. And this was what Jaffrey had for fire protection from 1900 to 1932 when we got the Seagrave. There is a factory photograph of the Seagrave. It was actually built in 1931. It was built as a stock car. Some of you can think back, some of you remember, a lot of you have heard more about the Great Depression. Seagrave Company wanted to keep their artisans, and they knew if they let the men go that they'd find employment somewhere else, but they probably would never get them back. So they built fire engines on spec, something that was unheard of prior to this. And this particular one went to Boston, and this was what was called a suburbanite. Seagrave built it. It's a small truck for a small town, and it fit the needs of Jaffrey quite nicely. Pearlie Enos, William Layton, and George Hart made up the Board of Engineers in 1931, and Herbert N. Packard would replace Pearlie as chief engineer in 1932. It is not known if one or more of these men went with George Emery to Boston and picked out this truck as for a very important purchase. There's another view of the same truck. They actually put a serial number, that little thing that says Seagrave by the rear tire, that actually has the truck's serial number on it. And this was done at the factory in Columbus, Ohio, on the loading dock. The backdrop is a tarpaulin that was pulled across the building to give a nice backdrop for the engine, and then they drove it into a freight car and shipped it to Boston. Most all of this stuff went by rail back in the 1930s. It was much more economical and practical to ship by rail than by any other means. The only caveat to George Emery's gift to the town was the town needed to provide a station suitable to house the truck. Now, in typical Jaffrey style, this invoked some different ideas. Some people thought that the old wooden post and beam building that had been built in 1855 just needed a little sprucing up and maybe some new wallpaper and would house the new truck just fine. George said, no, that's not what I've got in mind. We're going to talk, if we're going to have a new modern fire truck, we're going to have a new modern building to put it in. We did get the truck slightly before the station. If you look carefully out the second story windows, the left-hand window, far right-hand side, you can actually see a tree. There is no roof on the building in this picture. The truck is backed in the bay, but there is not yet a roof. The building actually ended up costing about $8,000, and that was what Mr. Emery had envisioned, and it served the town quite well. Matter of fact, I hope some of you have been noticing what the Peard family now bought the building, and I think they've kept the restoration true to the history of the building. I personally think they've done a nice job at keeping it. This is Labor Day, 1932, at the dedication of the new station. They blew the fire whistle and they rolled the Firefly out with the borrowed hand cranks and pumped it, and then brought the Seagrave out and pumped it as a demonstration, and that was part of the christening. The fire chief's wife, Mrs. Packard, gave a speech, and part of her speech was about these Currier and Ives prints. You see there's 4 of them on the west wall here. They were actually purchased and hung in the very first fire station, Kentucky Hall. They were saved and framed and hung in the new Emery station, and they have since, when the fire station moved down here in 1981, they came along with us, and the fire department members, out of their own funds, had them mounted on acid-proof paper, and they've been mounted, they're actually encased in that wall. It's a fireproof system to save those very important Currier and Ives prints that have so far been in every fire station that the town has had. This was Monadnock number 4's first motorized fire truck. What we can find out, Bob Bunce, Jaffrey Center person of some renown, donated that to the fire department. It had no pump on it, it carried the ladders, and it towed the fire extinguisher behind it. And there's a picture from another angle. This was the second Jaffrey Center fire truck, the only new one. That one was purchased in 1938. It was a Chevrolet Buffalo. It still looks just as good today as it did in that photograph. It's about 99% original. We sometimes joke and say, well, it only went to false alarms, but it's actually in quite good shape. There's where their letters come into play. See the JFD on the station?
Yeah.
When the station was new, those hadn't arrived yet. This picture was taken October 8th, 1939. There's actually a set of three. There's three of them in the back of the hall. The Seagrave is in the foreground. The second fire truck is a 1933 Chevrolet that the fire department bought. They realized that the town needed an additional fire truck. We're still in the Depression, 1933. The town had no means with which to purchase a fire truck. So the fire department members donated their year's pay. George Emery kicked in some, and they actually took subscriptions. And in the back, I actually have all of the records. We found them in the town vault on the third story of the library in some of the records. Everybody that donated money to that truck, we have the amounts of exactly what that truck cost, and who paid for it and how much they paid.
Dave, Kentucket Hall is missing in that picture, right? So did it burn in the?
No, it was torn down. I
Oh,
should have
okay.
said that a little more specific. When they built the Emery station, it's on the exact same site that Kentucket Hall was on.
Oh, okay.
But they tore it down and built the brick and mortar on the exact same site.
Oh, okay.
And of course, here you see in 1939, the blacksmith shop is gone. And it's been a vacant lot ever since. Well-needed parking. So the 28 members of the fire department, true to their volunteer doctrine, donated their year's pay, and subscriptions were solicited. The truck cost $625. The Chevrolet chassis was purchased through Oscar Dillon, the local Chevrolet dealer, and it was picked up in Boston. 2 fire department members took the morning train into the city, picked up the new Chevrolet chassis, and headed for home. I say chassis. This thing was bare bones. It had a hood and a cowl, steering wheel, front fenders. No seats, no windshield, nothing. Pearlie Enos was remembered as one of the members who made the trip. As the story goes, they found the traveling home more than just a little chilly. Stopping at a farmhouse along the way, they purchased an old storm window and some lashings for 50 cents. They attached the storm window to the chassis and continued home with their improvised windshield and apple crate seats. Upon arrival home, the new chassis was backed into Marcel Latoile's barn, where he constructed the body of the chassis, and that would serve as Jaffrey's second fire truck for the next 20 years. Now, Marcel Latoile's building still exists. It's on Nutting Road. As you pass Dean Farm Road to the left, the building that's on the right, it's a gambrel house. That originally was a barn, and that was Marcel Latoile's workshop. In 1935, Article 9, the town voted to raise and appropriate the sum of $675 to buy a front-end mounted pump and a booster tank for the Chevrolet fire truck. Now remember, we only paid $625 for the entire truck. Now we put a pump on it. In this picture, if you're keen, the Chevrolet is the one on the left, and you can actually see the pump on it. But it cost $675 just to put the pump on it. That would continue to serve until October of 1953. The Chevy was pumping water at Pool Reservoir at the reservation on Mount Monadnock, and they were pumping water up to Falcon Springs for the fire that was on that side of the mountain. And the coupling between the pump and the engine let go. It actually broke the crankshaft of the engine. Paul Leach patched it back together, but deemed it unfit for further fire department use. So in 1954, it was sold to James A. Coffin for a sum of $301.50. 1942 Chevy Army truck was purchased for $500. The pump was taken off this truck and put on the Army surplus truck. This photo has the two men in civvies, George Emery and Oscar Dillon. This is taken that same day. The men received new uniform hats and badges, and the new brass letters had just recently been put on the station, and that was the cause for the taking of these three very historic pictures. They've been well circulated through the Jaffrey Fire Service. And in the record books in the back, I have the names of all of the men.
Who's the chief? Is that chief in the middle?
That is Chief Packard, I believe. I have the name in the book, and I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, Harvey, but I do have it in record in the back. This is an interesting picture. You note that the mill chimney is still there for those who had some time in Jaffrey and remember the mill, the chimney. That's probably the last time until this past year that the Kentucky was pumped. It's probably taken out 1960. We can date the picture. You see the little girl in the foreground with the red hair? She's holding a blue and white starred balloon. This little girl here and her little brother. You probably have done, most of you in town have probably seen, that's Don Oswald. Paul Leach, pilot, mechanical engineer, chemist, firefighter, inventor. Paul joined the fire department in 1941, became chief in 1967. Chief Mike Worcester of Dublin, Chief Holbrook of Meadowood, and Chief Paul Leach of Jaffrey would be the cornerstone of firefighting modernization in southwestern New Hampshire. The 60s and 70s, the fire service made great leaps. All-wheel drive fire trucks, large capacity tanker trucks, the use of large diameter fire hose, which spawned the operation of Jaffrey Fire Protection downtown in the mill. Those were all greatly improved the firefighting abilities and capabilities of the area's fire departments, and at a price that was affordable. Here is the downtown fire station, probably in 1964. There was the first cab-over, all-wheel drive fire truck, in station with the 1953 Ford. That same cab-over truck with three men that we had fun identifying here one Sunday morning with the guys. To the left is Peter's grandfather, Roland Shorty Lambert. In the middle is our local sign painter, Walt Hotman. And on the right is Jack White, who would later on become chief. This is on the rear step of Engine 2. In a few years, protective clothing would be a must. You notice, a plaid wool coat, the Dickies, and street shoes. And the other thing is the NFPA would ban riding on the outside of fire apparatus. So this type of a photo is something that you won't see again.
Can I say one thing? On the left of my father's arm, there was a button. And if
Ring
you
the bell.
happened to fall off, you were supposed to hit the button so the driver know you were falling off.
Don't back up.
It's a short fall for you though, Rick.
Not all good ideas catch on. This was one of Paul's ideas. This was a German-built ladder, could be towed behind a pickup truck, taken to and assembled at a fire, hand cranked. It did work. It did not catch on. This one ended up cleaning chimneys for a local oil company. This is one that did catch on and worked. This was a Jaffrey first. This is the truck that was purchased when the 33 Chevy broke its crankshaft. This was the Army surplus truck. with a hose reel on the back of it, probably the first hose reel truck ever built for large diameter hose. The man on the rear step in the white is Robert C. Callahan, who was the, that's Robert C. Callahan. He was the chief of Fire Mutual Aid, and Paul Leach is right beside him on the right step. And they're at Meadowood Drill Yard just showing off how large diameter hose can be laid out and quickly redeployed and put back on the reel and back in service. Paul would soon build an improved version for Jaffrey and a dual-reeled version for Meadowood that would carry a mile of 4-inch diameter hose. This is another one of Paul's ideas. If you look closely, this is a 1/25th scale plastic model. Paul had a whole bunch of ideas with this thing. There is not a hose bed, there's no folded up hose. That was a 4-inch hose reel. There was a 2-inch hose reel. The pump panel, with most fire trucks up to that time, you could run the fire truck from the ditch side, curbside, or from the roadside. Depending upon where the fire was, it put the pump operator at a great disadvantage because he could not see the fire and see what was going on. With this truck, you had the option of operating it from either side with all the functions that the truck had. You could do everything. And that part of it worked slick, and that idea caught on, and they made some modifications to it, and it worked well. There is the actual truck that served here from 1972 up into 1993 when the current engine one was purchased. You'll notice it has compartment doors are roll-up. Those are imported from England. It was a first here in Jaffrey. Nobody had ever had a fire truck with roll-up doors. You could open them in the station. You didn't have to worry about leaving the compartment door open and driving out and ripping the door off, which happened more than one time. The hose reel on the back turned out, and you could lay a hose, and there's the hand line, the 2-inch hose on the front. No folding hose at all. You pushed the button and the reeled it back up and away you went. A lot of neat ideas. Some of them caught on, some of them didn't. But you know, you never know until you try. You turn the page. We're still 10 years out to the turn of the century. But history isn't just about things and trucks, but also about people. So let's finish tonight's program with a step back to an important event. Walter H. Clark joined the Jaffrey Fire Department in 1926. He was made an honorary member January 4th, 1954. He served as assistant foreman for 15 of those years and for foreman for 7 more. The occasion for this photograph is Walter and his wife Estella's 50th wedding anniversary. He was also honored as being the oldest fireman in the state of New Hampshire, both in terms of age and in years of service. If this celebration actually took place on the actual anniversary, it would have been September 1st, 1963, and he was 79 years old at that time. Now, to save any of you genealogy-minded folks a trip to the town history bookshelf, Walter and Estella had one daughter, Lorraine, who in 1946 would marry a man with the last name of Hill. They would have 2 sons, one that was named Bruce. Bruce, oh yeah, he's with us here tonight, look at that. Isn't it kind of neat how history wraps around us and comes back and involves us all? So we've got Mac McCabe as the police officer here in the left-hand shot, Joe Griffin, Phil Tremblay, Orrin Letourneau, Walter. I've got one unknown. The photograph that I've got is scratched. I could not, any way in the dickens, tell you who that was. Fire Chief Buster Gill, George Blair, Horace Deshane, Trapper Devlin, Kimball Tremblay, Bob Bunce, Bucky Devlin, and Sam Blanchett are also shown here. All right, thank you very much for your attention. Any questions? They didn't go to sleep, Peter.
No, they didn't.